Welcome back. This time we're talking about the new ABC series Designated Survivor. Now there are several new shows debuting on network television this fall that have piqued my interest, and I'm going to try to review at least the pilot episodes for each of those shows as they debut. Whether or not I continue reviewing them episode by episode or perhaps every few episodes will pretty much be determined on where the shows go. As for Designated Survivor, I do have to say it is one of the strongest pilot episodes for a network television series I've seen in a long time. First of all, I have to say I love how they started this episode, introducing us to Kiefer Sutherland's Alex Kurtzman, who is the Housing and Urban Development Secretary, by him sitting in a room with his wife while wearing a Cornell sweatshirt, watching the President deliver the State of the Union address. Of course, within moments, the broadcast is cut off, the Secret Service rush in, and we find out there's been an attack on the Capitol. We're then given a flashback to flesh out his character as well as the other characters we're going to be following in the series, and then we're back right in the action, and in a perfect moment right before a commercial break, we learn that the President and all of the other successors have been killed in the attack, and Kurtzman is now going to be President. That moment when he's told that he is the President is really powerful, the way they do it, even though it's a scene that we've seen in the commercials over the last several weeks advertising this show. And that scene, as well as pretty much the entire premise for this series, reminds me of Tom Clancy's novel Debt of Honor, which ends with our hero Jack Ryan being sworn in as Vice President moments before a jetliner is crashed into the Capitol while the President is making a speech in front of a joint session of Congress. And in the next book in that series, Sum of All Fears, Ryan has to deal with many of the things that Kurtzman is going to have to do in this series. And though it sounds obvious, that's really what's going to determine the success of the show, how they deal with the aftermath and where we go from here. And one of the biggest pitfalls the writers are going to face is the fact that we're dealing with Washington and politics, and we have a very divided country when it comes to politics. So they're going to have to find that balance of telling the story they want to without alienating half of the country. And I really hope they avoid the easy way of making one side of the political aisle the good guys while the other side is the bad guys. But aside from avoiding the pitfalls that a show like this is going to provide its writers and creators, this show is really going to ride on Kiefer Sutherland. And based on this first episode, I really like what he's done with his character. He's a man who is definitely out of his element, over his head. But there is a kind of steel core to his character, as we see in his interactions with the Iranian ambassador. I also enjoyed Natascha McElhone, who I just saw last week in Mr. Church, as Kurtzman's wife. We also have Penn as a speechwriter, who's introduced in one of the few comic relief moments we get in this episode, when he's bad-mouthing the President, not knowing he's actually talking to the President. And we also have Maggie Q as an FBI agent participating in the investigation of the attack itself, who apparently has lost someone in the Capitol bombing. Which leads us to probably this series' biggest question is, who was behind the attack? At least based on what we learned in the pilot, it seems that someone's trying to pin it on some kind of Islamic radical. And it's doubtful they'll go that obvious route, so for now the book is wide open on who it could be. So it looks like we're going to have a nice mix. On one hand, we're going to have the political/action side. We're going to have the investigation into the attack, and then whatever retribution comes once that they're identified. But we're also going to have to deal with the constitutional issues of pretty much one entire branch of government, the legislative side, gone. And the Supreme Court presumably was at the State of the Union address and would be gone as well, and a good portion of the cabinet and the executive. So Kurtzman is going to have to lead the country while rebuilding the government in a situation that the Constitution doesn't really outline the rules. And we see a little bit of that with the general trying to lay the framework for some kind of coup. Then on the other side, we're going to have the personal issues facing his family, who are now suddenly the first family of the United States. They're in the White House. We've got his wife, we have his two kids. His older son apparently is trying to get into the drug business. But there's also the minutia of the situation itself for them. At one point, the Secret Service takes his wife up to the residence, Well, the residence is the residence of the president who just died and his family. It's never made clear in the pilot if he had a wife or kids, and presumably they were at the Capitol at the time. But they're in this residence that's completely stocked with some other people's belongings. So I'm curious to see if they're going to touch on that and how they're going to have to deal with that. I know it's a minor issue, but it was something kind of stuck with me at the time. Now, there was one moment that kind of hinted at a storyline, or at least in my mind was hinting at a storyline, and it's one that I really hope they don't follow. And that's when Kirkman's chief of staff is trying to get in to see the president. She's gotten into the White House, and she tells the other staffer how he would know that Kirkman needs her by his side at this point, and I really hope they're not implying that he had an affair with her. It's just not something I want to see. I know it would add an extra level of crisis if that news broke to the public, but it's just, I hope they don't go there. That's just the one angle here I really just hope they just stay away from. But overall, I thought this was a very powerful, strong pilot, and one that really drew me in, and I'm very ready to see the next episode. As I said, I haven't really decided if this is going to be an episode-by-episode review or if I'm just going to do it every once in a while. It'll probably just to be determined on how many new shows I actually pick up to start watching, time constraints being what they are. So if you've seen the pilot episode of Designated Survivor, and I hope you did because I did include a few spoilers in this discussion, what do you think of it? Is it a show that you're going to pick up and continue watching, or are you one and done? As always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some of my other reviews, and until next time, be careful what you wish for, because you might just become president.